Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, some ABC stuff that Liberal Senator Sarah Henderson has criticised. It's a new comedy show focused on life in coronavirus isolation. Here's a snippet.
These are unprecedented times.
We know things are hard right now.
You're stuck inside with nothing to do.
You might be going out of your mind.
Just wanting to do something.
Anything.
But now, more than ever.
More than ever.
More than ever.
It's time to think about how your choices affect others.
So please, please,
Please,
don't start a podcast.
just don't do it.
OK, if you think this is funny, fine. But what I see is the usual media elitism. You know, they can all do their podcasts, but they don't want any of the little people getting a big idea. Then they throw in some rough language too because, well, I just don't know why. They just seem to get a kick out of it.
Make some pasta from scratch like everyone else and just shut up.
The greatest gift you can give your fellow human beings right now?
Right now,
Right now.
Is to shut the up.
Shut the up.
Come on.
Do it.
Don't start a podcast.
I mean, perish the thought that Alan Jones or anyone else wants to tell someone to put a sock in it, but telling everyone else to shut the F up that's comedy, they reckon. Joining me now is Sarah Henderson, a former ABC journo, now a Liberal Senator for Victoria. Sarah, is this stuff funny or just a waste of our tax dollars?
Well, let me say, having worked at the ABC, Chris, for 9 years, I'm a very big fan of our national broadcaster, but I didn't think it was very funny, and I actually found that particular segment very unfunny and quite offensive. Telling people to shut the F up is pretty bad, and nothing like what we've seen from the likes of Rake or Frontline or Norman Gunston or The Chaser or all the other wonderful comedy shows that have been produced over the years.
Now, you took to Twitter to criticise this. We'll put your tweet up on screen and see what you had to say here, because it caused quite a backlash. What you said is, as one of Australia's... I can't even read that, so there you go. People at home can read it. But
finest and most iconic TV journalists. What was Ray Martin thinking?
Indeed, but you said that the ABC ought to get this off the air. And a lot of people have taken umbrage to this. A lot of ABC people and others saying, this is outrageous. You're trying to talk to Ida Buttrose, the chair of the ABC, and tell her what to scrap. What do you think of that reaction?
Look, I was quite surprised, I have to say, Chris, and we haven't had that response into my office or by emails. I think it's very much confined to Twitter. And, of course, everyone has their own view, and as a member of the government, we have no control whatsoever on the editorial content of the ABC, and I make that point very clearly. But I do think that when the ABC is spending taxpayer dollars, in all seriousness, it's got to make sure that it spends those dollars wisely, and I just don't think this is great bang for its buck. And as I say, the ABC has an incredible history of producing first-class comedy, has a wonderful history, going back to Auntie Jack and, as I mentioned, some of the other programs before, including Frontline, and I had a small role on Frontline at one point. Many years ago now. Well, but I do think that perhaps there was a little bit of overreaction in my comments. There was, actually. I was just going to show a tweet here from Sally Rugg, who's hardly right of centre. She's been an activist for Get Up and the like, and she says, I don't know who made the ABC video, but if you've been thinking about starting a podcast, you should. More voices and more perspectives and more stories enrich our communities. We don't all have to have the same interests. Don't let famous people tell you otherwise. So I thought that's a reasonably interesting take on this. It was meant as a joke, of course, but this shut the F up, it's sort of this elitist thing that, you know, the famous people can do podcasts, but don't you get ahead of your station? Look, I certainly agree absolutely with Sally Rugg. I mean, one of the great things about the internet, about podcasts, about the fact that we all have a camera on our phone is that we all have a voice. And that's one of the wonderful things about making a podcast. So, I mean, clearly I disagree with the content of that particular part of the program and did find it offensive. But the ABC is a wonderful institution. I'm sure it will survive my bit of criticism, Chris, and life will go on. I just want to show you a promo for the program because one of the other
arguments that was pushed back to you on social media was that you're criticising a program that's giving people work during the pandemic. These people, artists and producers and the like, otherwise wouldn't have work. And have a look at this program, this promo. We can see who it was giving work to.
As Australia continues to live life in lockdown, it's never been more important to stay strong, because where there's hope, there's life. And where there's a will, there's a Ray. Coming to Wednesdays, a new show for your lockdown life. At Home Alone Together with Ray Martin.
There we go. Struggling young artist Ray Martin. That's who the ABC is keeping in employment.
Chris, can I make this one point? It is a good opportunity for me to plug investment in regional Australia, and I think the ABC is a much-loved institution in regional Australia. But here in Geelong, the ABC has this tiny cupboard of an office. So please, here is a plea, please, please, can we invest in a proper office, in a proper studio for the ABC here in Geelong, which looks like something you have never seen in Australian broadcasting. So there we go, an opportunity to drive some more investment into regional Australia.
You're dreaming. You used to work at the ABC, as did I, which would surprise a few people, but you know that they don't care about anything that's happening in Geelong. It's South Bank and it's Ultimo. It's inner city Melbourne and inner city Sydney. That's all it's about.
Well, I have taken representations to the head of News and Current Affairs, and I have been told that they are looking at this investment very closely. So I'm keeping fingers and toes crossed, Chris.
Good on you. Now, you did mention that when you were a journalist at the ABC, you actually appeared in the comedy satirical program, a brilliant program, I might add, Frontline. Here's a little bit of you with Mike Moore.
Journalist of 20 years experience, a Walkley Award winner like yourself, Sarah, but he made a mistake and now he's paying the price.
Suspension for 1 month?
Absolutely. It was a breach of the code of conduct. It was a misrepresentation of the facts.
1 month?
Sure, I know. And it makes you realise that no one's tougher on themselves than us journos.
Like, what I'm trying to say is, shouldn't have he been sacked?
There you go. You can hardly criticise ABC comedy after that role. Rob Sitch there playing Mike Moore. Frontline was a brilliant series.
Yeah, it was an absolutely wonderful series, still available on Stan, and I'm very proud to have had a very small role on a great program.
Was satire, was it really satirical, Frontline, or your experience of the media, especially now that you are a politician, were they perhaps spot on? It was more like an insightful documentary.
Well, I had quite a strong connection with the producers of Frontline at the time, and they did their research well, and I think there was a lot of factual underpinning in their stories.
It sure was. There sure was. Thanks for joining us, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Okay, great to talk to you, Chris.